In this podcast, we'll be talking about how we eat different kinds of food. We'll also discuss the question, how important are table manners? And Reza is back on the podcast, so we'll be catching up with Reza and hearing what he's been up to recently. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello and welcome, especially if you are a new listener to the podcast. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And with 50 years of teaching English between us, Reza and I will help you improve your English and take it up to the next level. How are you, mate? It's good to have you back on the podcast.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot. I'm feeling great. I'm sorry I've been away for a while, or am I? Maybe I've done you all a favor. Maybe listeners, You've been able to concentrate on just Craig, or you've enjoyed the voices of some of our very nice guest speakers, but I'm afraid I'm back.
We're really happy, but you've been missed not only by me, but by many people of the audience who have bothered to get in touch and say how much they missed you over the last few weeks. And it feels like ages, but it's only been a couple of months, I think, because at the end of July, you were very busy with work at the British Council. You had exams, you had the end of term workload, the immense amount of work that happens to teachers at the end of the academic school year. And then what happened?
Then I was away on holiday.
You went to Berlin.
I was away in Berlin. You were away in Scotland.
I went to Scotland just before you came back. So we missed each other. We couldn't record. Yeah.
And before that, before even the busy workload in July, I, like so many of our listeners, I'm sure, had COVID. So everything kind of was added on, one thing after the other. And before we knew it, about 2 months had passed without being able to record.
Yep. And then you went to Belfast, see your family. So everything kind of accumulated, one thing after the other. But it's great to have you back. We really missed you. So first this week, we have a voice message from Bahel, who has some very good news because his wife is pregnant.
Hello, Craig. Hello, Reza. I would like to thank you for all your effort and support. And Reza, we missed you. So come back from your holiday, please. And believe me, both of you, Sunday won't be beautiful without listening to an episode of your beautiful and wonderful podcast, which is not just educational podcast. It's podcast to give us motivation and the energy which we need for sure to start our Mondays. I don't know if you can talk about children or babies in one of the next episodes. My wife Luda, whom I love so much, is pregnant and we are expecting our first baby. We want to know more about children in the early stages. All the best. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your message, Bahel. And first of all, congratulations to you and Luda. And we're really happy that you're about to have a baby. And your message was very, very clear. Do you have any comments and feedback for him, Reza?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks as well to you, Bahel. Thanks very much. I'm very glad to be back. And of course, congratulations to you and your wife. Your message was excellent, very clear. I understood every single word. I don't think I detected any mistake at all. Did you, Craig?
No, it was very clear. Your pronunciation was top notch, which means it was very, very good. And as you probably know, Bahel, because you are a long-time listener, I don't have children, Reza doesn't have children. We're not experts on the subject, although not knowing about a subject has never actually stopped us from talking about it, because we've spoken about this before, haven't we? But we needed somebody with experience on the podcast.
Yes, Bahel, actually, you can find an episode already recorded a while back. In fact, it was episode 211. So if you go to inglespodcast.com/211, you'll find there our episode about pregnancy and babies with our special guest and good friend Lynn, who does know what she's talking about because she has her own kids.
Yeah, she has 3 daughters, so she is very well experienced in childbirth. So we suggest you listen to that episode, Bahel. And then if there's anything more specifically about newborn babies that you'd be interested to know, perhaps we'll be able to get Lynn back on the podcast with us in the future and talk more about this. So all the best, and thanks again for your message. And by the way, Lynn is an online English teacher. She teaches over the internet. So if anyone is interested in lessons with Lynn, she will be back teaching in a week or 2 in September 2022. You can reach her by going to her website, putitlikethis.com, and I'll leave a link to her website in the show notes. Thanks to Carla and Aldi for visiting me here in Valencia back at the end of June, a couple of months ago. And they got in touch. We had a lovely coffee together and a chat. And they brought Reza and I a gift, a present of some Tim Tams, some chocolate biscuits, and some lovely chocolate from New Zealand. And we've just done the Tim Tam challenge. What did you think, Reza?
Thank you very much, Carla and Aldi, for introducing me to the Tim Tam Explosion Challenge. What a fantastic experience.
It was.
The biscuit on its own, when you just bite off the corner, you think, yeah, that's not bad. I like that. But boy, whenever you've bitten off both the corners and you suck up the tea or coffee, that's when it becomes another dimension.
Orgasmic.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, if you want to see a video of Reza and I doing the Tim Tam challenge live on camera, go to the show notes for this episode, 429. So that's inglespodcast.com/429. You can see us doing the Tim Tam challenge there. And also we've included links to 2 YouTube videos that explain exactly what the Tim Tam challenge is. And if you want to do it at home, if you can get some Tim Tams or something similar, then you are welcome to try it yourself. Please let us know if you have actually done it and what your experience was. Thanks again so much to Carla and Aldi. Let's speak a little bit, Reza, about eating other things. How do you eat Oreos? Oreos are the small round biscuits which are usually chocolate, and they have a sweet white creamy filling, and sometimes they're covered with chocolate. Do you have a special technique?
Well, I'm afraid my answer to that is I never eat Oreos.
You don't like them?
I don't like them, no. But I do eat very similar biscuits to Oreos. So there are many biscuits which have a filling, something in the middle. So there's effectively 2 biscuits and there's something in the middle joining them together, something sticky, which makes them stick like adhesive. But I don't particularly like Oreos, but I do like things like, for example, do you know bourbon creams?
Yes, they're similar, aren't they? But not quite as sweet.
Not as sweet, and a slightly chocolatey taste, not very chocolatey.
How do you eat bourbons? Let's say there's no tea to dunk or put the biscuit in to make it wet and soggy. You're just eating a bourbon on its own. How do you eat it?
It depends on my mood. Depends on sometimes I just
attack it violently.
I do attack it violently, abusively, aggressively, and just stick it in my mouth sometimes. But other times when I'm feeling a bit more playful and a bit more creative, I do rip off one of the sides and eat that. So I get the taste.
You take it off with your fingers.
With my fingers, yeah. So I'll get a side perhaps which has none of the filling or not much of the filling stuck to it, for variety, and then I will eat the other side which does have the filling stuck in it. So that way I feel, oh, this is luxury. It's like I'm getting 2 types of biscuits here. Something plain and something with a sticky bit on it.
I do something very similar, but I don't take off one side with my fingers. I nibble, to nibble, N-I-B-B-L-E, is to take small, very small bites of the biscuit on one side and the same on the other side. So the biscuit around the edge is all eaten and I have more cream inside to eat with the biscuit. That's my technique.
For me, actually, funny you mention Oreos. They're a very famous biscuit these days, but they weren't in my day when I was a kid growing up. They've always been famous in America. They're an American invention, but I don't know if you could even get them in the 70s or 80s in the UK. I remember them coming in. I was like, oh, there's that American biscuit that you always see on TV. Now you can get it on the supermarkets. But I'm pretty sure when I was a young kid, you couldn't.
Yeah, that's American colonialism for you. Moving on, because when I met Carlo and Aldi and we had coffee together, one topic of conversation was how we eat different kind of foods. Now, pizza, hamburgers, and maybe empanadas, like pies, meat pies, for example, are they better with your hands or a knife and fork? And how would you normally eat those kind of foods?
Well, really, who we need to ask about that are Carla and Aldi, because I revere Argentinian pies. The Argentinians know a thing or two about pies, don't they?
Yeah, they're very, very good. Absolutely. Their tendency was to eat this kind of food with their hands. And I tend to eat pizza, hamburgers, pies with a knife and fork because I don't like to get my hands greasy and dirty. And I've always been this way. I prefer using a knife and fork, which is strange to eat a hamburger with a knife and fork. And I don't think it tastes any worse.
I'm afraid I definitely am the opposite end of the spectrum. For me, I don't see any sense in using a knife and fork there. Possibly a knife, well, I guess you need the fork to hold the pizza or the pie to cut it into a few pieces. Instead of having like a huge slice of pizza in your hand, I might cut it into 2 or 3 portions, but then that's it. After that, I don't need the knife and fork. It's got to be hands.
Well, we'll see. We will give our contact details at the end of this podcast, and we'd like to hear from you. How would you prefer to eat food like pizza, hamburgers, maybe hot dogs, knife and fork, or with your hands? And is there a difference in the taste? Now, another thing I spoke about with Carlo and Aldi was spaghetti, because I'm sure you know there's quite a large Italian influence in Argentina. Spaghetti is a popular dish around the world. And I was surprised to hear that Italians will typically eat spaghetti only with a fork. I don't know if you agree with that. I tend to eat it with a fork and a spoon and curl the fork around in a circle to get the spaghetti, using the spoon to help me.
That's exactly what I do, because I've tried it with just the fork, because I saw Italian guys on TV do it, but it just kept dropping off my fork.
Yeah,
I needed the spoon to stop it dropping onto the plate again.
Must be a technique that Italians learn when they're very young. Asian food from China, Japan, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. Does it taste better when you use chopsticks? Do you use chopsticks?
I do. And in my mind, sometimes it seems to taste better, but it might be just psychological, because I think, yeah, I'm doing it the right way. And if you do things the right way, it's better. So whether the food really tastes better, I don't know, but I do enjoy when I successfully use chopsticks to eat Asian food. I say when I successfully do it because very often it goes wrong. And there are some things which I just can't be bothered to eat with chopsticks, like rice. Rice on its own, I can't be bothered to to dip in the chopsticks and get about 3 grains or 4 grains of rice at most. I want at least about 15, 20 grains of rice in my mouth. I'm not happy with 3 or 4. And I don't know how Asians do it, but they manage to get loads of rice on the chopstick. I can't do that.
Well, I can tell you how they do it, because if you watch an Asian eat with chopsticks, if they have a bowl of rice, for example, they tend to hold the bowl very close to their mouth and use the chopsticks together as kind of a shovel or a spoon and push the rice into their mouth from the bowl, and they can eat rice very quickly that way. Which brings me to the main topic of the podcast, really. manners, table manners. Now, obviously, in the Asian culture, that's perfectly acceptable. Although maybe in Western culture, if somebody sees you pushing food into your mouth with the bowl very close to your head, some people might think that's not good manners.
I do it when I'm in Chinese restaurants or at home.
Me too.
I do it, but I wouldn't do it with European and other types of food because I know it's not considered the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's very strange, and I think in some places it might be considered not good table manners. So we thought it was a good idea to look at a few conventions, habits, table manners, just to see if we think they would be acceptable in Western culture or as we were brought up in our British homes.
We'll be interested to know how Bachel and Luda are going to bring up their baby. What are you going to teach your baby? Are you going to teach your baby, yes, you can eat pizza with your hands? Are you going to teach your baby, no, you can't? Are you going to teach your baby to use chopsticks? Give us a bit of feedback. Let us know how things go, please, in the future.
Yeah, we'd be very interested to hear that. Now, in most cultures, I think it's bad manners to eat with your mouth open, isn't it? To see a person chewing food. The verb to chew is where you break down the food with your teeth and use your teeth to make it smaller. So I think you would agree that that's quite bad manners, to see the food in your mouth while you're eating.
Yes, I can't think of any culture where that's considered widely acceptable. I reckon most people in the world would agree with that.
Do you think you should always use a serviette or a napkin?
I think you should if you can, but it was first pointed out to me by Spanish people that they came across British people who didn't bother. So the British are not the best in the world when it comes to using a serviette and napkin.
I agree.
Serviette, napkin, it's the same thing, by the way.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because what were you brought up saying in your house? Would you be more likely to hear the words serviette or napkin?
Well, I know napkins considered to be posher, more upper class.
That's why I ask.
I grew up saying serviette.
Me too.
It says a lot about me, actually.
Me too.
By the way, I also grew up saying settee rather than sofa.
Yeah.
And sofa's posher as well, apparently.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, they basically mean the same.
So things have changed, but quite a few years ago, I began to observe that, yes, effectively, sometimes in British households, a table is set, to set the table, to put all the things there, without a serviette. Either they forget or they purposely don't do it. And you'd never see that in Spain. Never. I've been in very, very humble places in Spain, perhaps like student flats that are shared. They haven't got much money, but you always get a serviette. It's an absolute essential. And I have a feeling that still there aren't many serviettes being used in student flats in the UK. They aren't bothering much about it, I would say.
One thing I did when I was quite poor and I didn't have a lot of money in my early 20s, when people came to my flat to eat, I would give them a piece of toilet paper, because I had no napkins and no serviettes to give them. And nobody said anything. Maybe they thought it was a bit strange, but they used toilet paper. But there was something there that they could wipe their mouths with.
Yeah. The mouths or something else later if they wanted to.
Yeah, especially if it was a curry I was cooking.
But Craig, if you could choose, what would be your choice of a serviette or napkin? Would it be cloth or would it be paper?
Cloth, yeah.
At home, do you use cloth?
Yes.
Me
yes,
too,
actually.
actually.
Do.
Yeah, quite funny.
Although when I visit my sister, I usually get a paper towel from the kitchen. So in our house growing up, it was quite common to get a paper towel, not toilet paper, but a paper towel, which we used to call polyroll in the UK, a paper towel from the kitchen towel, yeah. And how strict were your parents at the table with you growing up? For example, were they very insistent and strict about how you held your cutlery, your knife and fork?
They were when I was a kid, but when I grew up, then they relaxed. What about yours?
They were strict, yeah. I had to hold my knife and fork in a particular way. I had to put my knife and fork together on the plate in the middle when I'd finished. And if I hadn't finished my meal, I had to cross the knife and fork, make a cross, put one on top of the other to show that I was in the middle if I needed to go to the toilet or something.
And when you finished and you put them together in the center of the plate, did the handles have to be in a certain place, to the right or to the left, or was that irrelevant?
No, they never mentioned that. Is that a thing? Is that important?
For me, it was the handles had to be on the right.
Really?
Yeah, but into the bargain. Not only did you have to leave them together with the handles, which would extend off the side of the plate because they'd be bigger, perhaps, to the right.
And is anyone in your family left-handed?
No.
Okay.
No, not that I know.
So that didn't cause any problems. What other important habits should we mention, or maybe that our parents drummed into us as a kid? If your parents drum, D-R-U-M, something you hit, a musical instrument, if they drum into you particular behavior, they insist on it, they repeat it many, many times until it becomes a forced habit.
Well, there's the classic, of course, of saying, can you pass the salt, for example, please? Or can you pass the sauce? Or can you pass that, please? Not just grab across the table, but ask for it.
Yes, and it's bad manners to lean over somebody else who is eating. So if something's close to you, you can take it, but if something's just a little bit too far, you have to ask for it. Definitely.
And what about when you should start eating? Were you told that other people should be served first, everybody served, and then you can start eating, not before?
That's an interesting question. I was brought up to not start eating until everybody had the food on their plate, or until somebody said, start eating before it gets cold. And that gave me permission to start eating, and I still follow that habit today. If I'm in a restaurant, I wait until everybody has been served, and hopefully someone will say, hey, Craig, start eating, your food's getting cold, and then I will happily start eating. Because it is a shame to pay for good food or have somebody prepare good food and let it get cold on the plate. It doesn't make any sense to me. But good manners always make me wait.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Same as me. What about the mobile on the table now? For some people,
very contentious.
They would say, but some people wouldn't see any harm in it whatsoever, whereas others go crazy. They find it terrible. What about you?
I would never put my mobile phone on the table, and I would only answer it or pay attention to it if I was expecting a very important call. Or if we were talking about something and I needed Google to check something, then I would, with everybody's agreement, I would but that's different. You're sharing the mobile phone with the company, with the people. You're not just looking at your Facebook page to see if anyone sent you a message. You're actually using the phone as an aid or as a tool to kind of help the conversation. It's not the same, in my opinion. What do you think?
I would completely agree with that. Yep. What about your elbows on the table?
It depends who I'm with. If I were having lunch with you and your partner, then yes, I would possibly put my elbows on the table without thinking because I feel completely comfortable. But with people who I didn't know so well, and maybe I wouldn't. What about you?
I think the same, yeah. Although I had it drummed into me when I was a kid not to do it. It's a very typical thing that parents say. Like, what are those elbows doing on the table, young man?
Get those elbows off the table.
But now I'm a bit more relaxed about it. Particularly certain food, like hamburgers. Whenever you're kind of getting it into your mouth, it could fall into pieces. As we all know, you could have a bit of a disaster. And it seems to help sometimes if you put your elbows on the table to kind of make sure there's not a disaster there.
Or you could use a knife and fork.
You could. Indeed, you could.
And that solves the problem.
Last but not least of the kind of classic things that everybody thinks about, washing your hands. These days, I see many, many, many people eating without washing their hands. And for me, it's a big deal. For me, it's very important to wash your hands before eating. Always has been and always will be.
Absolutely. No, and when I go to a restaurant, the first thing I do is go into the bathroom, the toilet, and wash my hands before I sit down. Burping is making the noise. Should we do it? Should we burp? It's difficult to explain, isn't it? That's a burp. I apologize if that offended you, but I couldn't think of any other way of explaining it. Now, I know in some cultures that shows appreciation for a good meal, but it doesn't in the West, does it?
No, but I believe, or it's a stereotype anyway, that in certain Middle Eastern countries, And I haven't been to many Middle Eastern countries to verify this, but in Middle Eastern countries, it's supposed to be the opposite. That if you burp after a meal, you're saying, "Oh, look, I've eaten so much, and with such enthusiasm that now the gas is coming out because I've had such a good time." I think that's supposed to be the theory behind it. Is that what you've heard?
I have heard that. We'd be very interested to hear from anybody who is in a culture in which burping, B-U-R-P, to burp, is that accepted in social situations? If anyone's listening and they do burp regularly to show appreciation for the food, please tell us which country you're in and where it is acceptable.
Craig, we've already spoken about should you eat before everybody's served, but what about the actual serving? Who should do it? Let me get straight down to it. Let me avoid any ambiguity. Should it be the man? I'm asking. Don't shoot the messenger. According to some people, I didn't say me. Oh, the man serves. And particularly if it's meat. Oh, first he carves the meat. To carve is to cut. And then he, the man, the daddy, will serve. What do you think about that?
I think it should always be the butler. I'm obviously joking. I've never had a butler. No, well, yes, that is a stereotype, isn't it? But I think the person who prepared the meal should be the one to serve it. And whether that be a woman or a man, I don't think it will make any difference to me. That the person who prepared the meal should have the pleasure of serving it to the guests.
What about wine? Who serves the wine?
It doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. I think men tend to be the person who opens the wine and serves the wine, but it shouldn't matter. Why should it be the man?
I totally agree with you, but I'm thinking of films, TV series, and 8 out of 10 times seems to be the man who does it, And it doesn't really matter if it's America, if it's France, if it's the UK. Very often it seems to be the man. And what's more, if the stereotypes you see in TV and the film are right, quite often if it's a couple, quite often it seems that the woman asks the man to do it. Yes. Not only that, she could do it, but she says, "Would you pour me a glass of wine, or shall we have a glass?" And it's like the prompt for him to do it.
But isn't that coming back to manners where a man, for example, would open the door for the lady, open the car door so that the lady could go in the car? Doesn't it go back to that kind of good manners, letting the lady walk through the door first? But another interesting thing connected to food is where the woman may often do the cooking and maybe the man does the washing up. Whereas if there's a barbecue, it's the man who usually controls the barbecue. Why is that? Doesn't make sense to me either. Perhaps it's connected to caveman days where the man would hunt the animal and then prepare the fire. So this is the idea of the man providing food for his partner and his family around the fire, like when they lived in caves. I don't know.
Yes, and by the way, we're recording in Valencia, as many of our long-time listeners know, Valencia in Spain. Also, a classic tradition is Daddy does the paella on a Sunday, particularly if it's outside. He may not cook any other time. So their version of the barbecue is, Dad, el papa, he does the paella on Sunday. Mum just cooks everything else all the rest of the year.
It gives the mum the day off, perhaps, where she doesn't have to think about the cooking. But don't forget, and most men know this, when you do the paella or the barbecue, then you can drink a lot of beer. It's a good excuse. You're hot, you're near the flames, near the fire. It's a fantastic way to just keep drinking beer all afternoon.
And you've done something useful, which kind of might get your wife or girlfriend off your back. It's like, oh, should I criticize him for drinking all that? Well, he did make the paella. He deserves it.
Let's go back to speaking about dunking, because earlier in the podcast we were dunking or dipping or putting tam-tams into hot liquid. What can be dunked in what, in your opinion? Obviously, we can dunk biscuits in tea. I think you agree that that's acceptable in British culture.
Is it? It is for me. My
It
mom
always has.
hates it.
Does she really?
Oh, she considers it extremely bad
That
manners.
surprises me.
Very bad manners, according to my mum. But I blatantly flout her rules in front of her face and do it. But she severely dislikes it.
That surprises me. I thought your mum would enjoy dunking.
Oh, she's not a dunker.
Okay.
No, I think she's quite ashamed that she gave birth to a dunker.
My mum and my dad were always dunkers, so they did enjoy dunking biscuits in tea. Another thing that occurs to me...
But hold on, though. You see nothing as well. Honest, think about it. Imagine you get nominated as the best podcaster of the year, and you get invited to an event, and somebody posh, the Queen herself perhaps, is there. You're having a cup of tea with the Queen. You're going to dunk in front of the Queen?
Absolutely.
You would dunk in front of the Queen?
I would dunk in front of the Queen. No problem whatsoever.
I would think twice about that, and I do love a dunk, but I think, it's the Queen, I better not dunk.
No, I would dunk. I think I would dunk, in spite of the fact that it was the Queen. What about soup? I often dip bread in soup. And when I was a kid, I don't have tomato soup very often, but tomato soup, I like to break up the bread and put it in the soup. So I'm eating soft bread in the soup. Is that acceptable?
My mum was always easy on that. So for me, I was brought up thinking it's okay. The biscuits, no. But the dipping of bread in soup, yes, she thought that was okay. I mean, there are croutons, hard bread, which is set into the soup. So why not dip your own bread? That's the way I see it.
That's my feeling as well.
You know what, Craig? This is actually a much, much, much wider and more complicated topic than you might think. Dunking. It's not just about the tea, the soup, horchata. All right to dunk?
Horchata. We should explain to people who don't know what horchata is. Horchata is a sweet, cold drink, often drunk here in Spain in the summer and also in many other countries. Tiger nuts, sugar. And what is dunked traditionally in horchata?
Well, not only are you allowed, but you're actively encouraged to dunk fartons in horchata. So in its place of origin, Albaraya, not Valencia, by the way, Albaraya, right beside Valencia, you get your fartons, which is like a soft, long, spongy breadstick, but it's much softer than a breadstick.
And it's sweet.
And you dip that in the horchata. It sucks up the horchata, and you eat it. All Valencians know that, and most Spanish people know about that. But a foreigner might see that for the first time and find it disgusting, but it's absolutely the done thing here, isn't it?
And it's very good. It's very tasty, especially in hot weather.
What about, Craig? Here's one for you. Let's see how strict your parents were. For my mum growing up as a kid, and still today, really, she's a bit strict on it. HP, bottle of sauce on the table? No way. Can't have that bottle on the table.
Tomato ketchup?
Tomato ketchup? No way. Got to put that in a container which has no label on it.
No, we were obviously a much lower class. We had all the brands, the Heinz mayonnaise, and all in the original bottles and jars on the table. So we didn't transfer it to other containers.
But for you, is that a thing that you were familiar with as a kid that some people didn't like?
No, but I did notice when I went to restaurants, they did not have the bottles on the table. They had them in little bowls with a spoon. And I thought, oh, that's very posh. They don't have a bottle of tomato ketchup on the table. It's in a small bowl.
What about, let's see how posh you are, Craig. How do you pass a bottle of port? What about they had a Pinot Porto? How do you pass that? Just give it to anybody you want at the table?
Well, I know if it's marijuana, you pass it to the left. Is that the same with port? You pass it to the left?
I don't know, but we'll have to check. But there are strict rules about it, apparently.
Really?
A bottle of port has to be passed in a certain direction around the table, apparently. Oh, yeah, I can't remember if it's clockwise or anti-clockwise. There's a certain way it has to go around the table, apparently.
I suspect that tradition comes from sailing and the sea, maybe where the captain has the first glass of port and then passes it in a particular direction. I don't know. If anybody does know, please let us know.
What about cheese? What could possibly be controversial about cheese? Virtually all countries in the world have cheese or eat cheese, enjoy cheese. Okay, so far so good. Well, when do you eat it? When does that old cheese board come out? Does it come out before dessert or after dessert? Or Spanish style, neither before nor after dessert, but long before that? as an appetizer or starter? When do you get the old cheese out?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because growing up in the UK, the cheese and the crackers or the cheese and the bread always came out. It's called a cheese board, B-O-A-R-D. The cheese board always came at the end of the meal instead of or in addition to dessert.
So in addition to means after dessert if you're having dessert.
Correct. However, here in Spain, I think it's more common to have it before the meal, which I prefer because I can really appreciate the taste of the cheese on an empty stomach. Whereas if I have it after the meal, I'm too full usually, and I can't really appreciate how good the taste is of the cheese. So before, I prefer.
But if you think about it, it hugely changes the experience of the meal. If you do a British style, the last taste in your mouth is a salty taste, a savory taste of cheese, not sweet at all. It's very different to ending on dessert.
Yeah. Although if you've had a couple of glasses of port, I don't suppose you care that much. And salty things does go well with after dinner drinks like port. Reza, if you're invited to a meal at somebody's house, were you brought up, was it drummed into you as a kid to take something with you as a gift?
Now, here's a funny thing. My answer to this, no, but I always do. So we've been talking about what a pain in the neck my mum was about certain things. She didn't care about that, but I insist on doing it. And recently, when I was visiting my mum in Belfast a few months ago, we were invited to 2 different barbecues, as it happens. And she saw no necessity on either occasion to bring anything. It was me who insisted that, oh, I'm not going to go to a barbecue and not bring some wine. She was like, oh, you don't need to.
Oh, but wait a second. Was it a family barbecue or was it somebody who you didn't maybe know that well?
Family.
Maybe that's the reason. If you feel very comfortable with the people, maybe it's not necessary to take something. But if you're invited for the first time maybe or to somebody you don't know, then obviously it's politeness to take a bottle of wine or maybe a dessert or some chocolates.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's my opinion. If you know somebody very well, then I think it's okay to just go. If I went to your house, which I often do for food, I wouldn't feel obliged to take something because we've got a close relationship.
Yeah. So here's a one that I'm interested in getting feedback from, particularly Spanish people, but of all nationalities. Here's the question. Is it all right to use your own personal fork, the fork that's been going into your mouth, I mean, to take bits from a plate in the center shared by all? Is that okay? It's an everyday sight in Spain. Is it okay?
That's a good question. I'm thinking about it. I think pre-COVID, BC, before COVID, I think I would have said, yes, it's okay. It's perfectly okay if you're taking different types of food with your fork and you're not actually cutting things with your knife that's been touching your mouth, etc. However, now...
Oh, your knife touching your mouth? My mum would be horrified. Your knife touching your mouth?
Well, touching...
Your knife?
Touching your fork, which has touched your mouth, so it contaminates it. You don't put the knife in your mouth.
Knife never in the mouth.
No, never in the mouth.
Although I do at home, like when I've used the peanut butter, I'm not gonna just let that peanut butter go to waste. I suck what's left on the knife. But yeah, in public, the knife in the mouth, never.
But you wouldn't suck the knife, the peanut butter, then put it back in the jar, would you, to take more?
But at the end, as a pre-cleaning kind of thing, I'll just suck whatever's left there.
Yeah, me too.
But my mum would go crazy if she saw that.
But your original question, the paella, for example, is in a big dish called a paella, and everybody's putting their fork inside, touching rice, touching things.
No, the spoon goes in the paella, never the fork.
You've never had a paella with a group of people, and at the end of the meal, after everybody's served and there's just a little bit of paella left, you've never gone in with your fork to take pieces?
I've gone in with my spoon. Yeah, which has been in my mouth. Same thing.
Same thing. So now, post-COVID, I would say that is not a good idea. What do you think?
I think it would probably never was a good idea. But since everybody was doing it, I thought, hey, if you can't beat them, join them. 2 or 3 people have already done it. I might as well do it. But I would probably prefer if nobody did it, if I'm honest. But I know it's not the end of the world.
But tapas is that, isn't it? Tapas is sharing food and everybody jumps in with their fork and takes something from the tapas plates.
I'd be very interested to hear from non-Spaniards if it's common in their country to do that. Because in the UK, it doesn't really happen, does it? If there's something which is shared centrally, like, for example, a big salad, the idea is there will be serving cutlery.
And a plate for you to put the salad on.
So there's this knife or fork or spoon or all three, which stay in the salad bowl in the middle. You pick up the salad with that, you put it, or whatever it is, or the Russian salad, the potato salad, whatever. You pick it up with that, put it in your plate, and then put that cutlery back in.
Exactly.
Not put your own in, right?
Exactly. So, yeah, we would be very interested to hear what you think of that and what you think about anything we've mentioned in this podcast. So now it's your turn to practice your English. You can do that by sending us a voice message. Go to speakpipe.com, speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. Remember, you only have 90 seconds to leave us a message on the SpeakPipe service. If you want to talk for longer, just record an MP3 and send it as an attachment in an email. Emails go to me, Craig, Craig, at inglespodcast.com. What's your address, Reza?
You could write to me. That's belfastreza@gmail.com.
And we remind you that you can visit the Mansion Ingles online store. If you fancy some paid courses to help you with your English, go to store.mansioningles.net.
As always, we'd like to thank all of you who help us by supporting this podcast on the Patreon scheme. That's Patreon. If you're interested in this scheme, check it out. Have a look at the link in the show notes, patreon.com/Ingles podcast. And what people do in the scheme is they donate money. It has to be a minimum of $1.20 because the 20 is to pay the VAT tax. And as a thank you for people who do that, we give you access to recent audio transcriptions.
And unfortunately, we don't have time to thank everybody who's supporting us on Patreon, but we will say thank you very, very much to the recent Patreon supporters who have joined us this month. And they are Manuel Prado, Edgar Velandia, Alberto Valverde Conde, Olga Fernandez, Fernando del Ferro, Melissa A. Daota, Jordi Antolin Taraga, and apologize if I've mispronounced any of those names. Special thanks go to Ana Criado, who is supporting us with more than the $1 minimum. Thank you, Anna. And thank you to everybody who is involved in our Patreon program. What's next week, Reza?
Next week, there'll be a very special guest that I think you'll enjoy.
So we're not going to tell you who that is, but I will say that it is a very good idea to listen to next week's podcast. And of course, we want to thank Reza for coming back on this week. It's lovely to have you back, mate. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends so that more people can listen to us. Thank you for listening this week. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's bye-bye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.